Captain Zara Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her dark eyes scanning the star charts displayed on the holographic interface. The Deep Space Patrol had been routine until now, 3 months into their 6-month mission along the Outer Rim territories. The crew of 200 had settled into the comfortable rhythm of exploration and scientific survey work. "Captain, we're receiving an unusual transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from the communication station, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "It's not coming from any known human frequency." Chen turned toward him, her military bearing evident in every movement. After 15 years in the United Earth Space Navy, she had learned to trust her instincts, and something about Rodriguez's tone made her stomach tighten with anticipation. "Put it through the universal translator and run it on the main speakers," she ordered, moving closer to the center console. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Then crackling through the speakers came a voice unlike anything they had heard before. It was melodic yet desperate, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in frequencies beyond human hearing. "This is Research Vessel Harmony's Light of the Etherian Science Collective. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Our shields are failing. We carry critical data about a threat to all sentient life in this galaxy. Please, if anyone receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance. We cannot let this information die with us." The message repeated twice more before dissolving into static. Chen felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. First contact protocols were clear, but this was different. This was a cry for help from beings who might hold the key to understanding threats they couldn't even imagine. "Rodriguez, trace that signal." "How far out are they?" Chen commanded, her voice steady despite the racing of her pulse. "Working on it, Captain. The signal is weak, but I'm getting a bearing. Approximately 14 light-years from our current position, in the Kepler 442 system." Chen's mind raced through the calculations. At maximum warp, they could reach the source in 18 hours. But protocol demanded she contact Earth Command first, and by the time authorization came through, it might be too late for whoever had sent that desperate plea. "Captain," her first officer, Commander Sarah Kim, approached with concern etched across her features. "If we respond to this without authorization, we could be looking at a court-martial. The non-interference directive is explicit about contact with unknown species." Chen nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Kim's words. The non-interference directive had been established after humanity's disastrous first contact with the Centauri Republic 50 years ago. That incident had nearly led to war and had taught humanity the importance of careful, methodical approaches to alien contact. But something about the desperation in that alien voice gnawed at her conscience. The being had mentioned a threat to all sentient life. Could she really stand by and let them die while waiting for bureaucrats on Earth to make a decision? "Rodriguez, how long would it take to get authorization from Earth Command?" "At least 48 hours for a priority communication, Captain. Maybe longer if they decide to convene the Xenological Council. Too long." Chen knew in her gut that whatever was happening to that alien ship, it wouldn't wait for Earth's bureaucracy to catch up. "Kim, call all senior officers to Conference Room Alpha. We need to discuss our options." Chen's voice carried the weight of command, but Kim could hear the internal struggle beneath it. Within 10 minutes, the senior staff had assembled around the polished metal conference table. Chief Science Officer Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson, Security Chief Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes, and Medical Officer Dr. Yuki Tanaka all looked to their captain with expectation and concern. Chen played the alien transmission again, watching as each officer's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. The melodic quality of the alien voice seemed to convey emotion that transcended language barriers. "Opinions?" Chen asked simply. Dr. Vasquez spoke first, her scientific curiosity evident. "Captain, this could be the most significant xenological discovery in human history. The mere fact that we can understand their language through our translation matrix suggests a level of technological sophistication that could benefit all of humanity." Hayes, ever the security officer, countered immediately. "It could also be a trap. We know nothing about these beings or who's attacking them. Walking into an unknown combat situation with no intelligence or backup would be suicide." Thompson, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, added his perspective. "The Prometheus is a science vessel, not a warship. Our shields and weapons are adequate for defense, but we're not equipped for a major engagement." Dr. Tanaka, quiet until now, spoke with careful consideration. The ethical implications are staggering. If we have the capability to save lives and choose not to act, how does that reflect on us as a species? The Hippocratic Oath doesn't just apply to humans anymore. The room fell silent as each officer contemplated the magnitude of their decision. Chen looked around the table at these people she had served with for 3 years, knowing that whatever choice they made would define not just their careers, but possibly their consciences for the rest of their lives. There's something else to consider, Kim said slowly. They mentioned critical data about a threat to all sentient life. If that's true, and we let that information die with them, we might be condemning not just their species, but potentially our own. Chen stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the starfield beyond. Somewhere among those distant lights, beings were fighting for their lives and possibly for information that could save countless others. "I've made my decision," she said, turning back to face her officers. "We're going to respond to that distress call. We'll proceed at maximum warp and assess the situation when we arrive. If it's beyond our capabilities, we'll transmit our findings to Earth Command and hope they can mount a proper rescue mission." The weight of her words settled over the room. Each officer understood that they were about to make history, though none of them could predict whether it would be remembered as humanity's finest hour or its greatest folly. As they prepared to depart, none of them realized that their decision to answer one desperate alien's call for help would soon draw the attention of the most feared military force in known space, setting in motion events that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. 18 hours later, the UES Prometheus dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what they found defied every expectation they had harbored during their journey. Captain Chen stood frozen on the bridge, staring at the tactical display that showed a scene of devastation unlike anything in human records. The alien research vessel hung in space like a broken bird, its elegant curves marred by massive hull breaches and flickering shield generators. But it was the ships attacking it that truly captured their attention. 7 vessels of clearly non-human design surrounded the damaged craft, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez from her science station. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures I've never seen before. These attacking vessels are using weapons that appear to disrupt matter at a subatomic level." Hayes bent over his tactical console, his face grim. "Captain, those ships are massive. Each one is at least twice the size of our largest battle cruisers. And their weapon system—" He paused, running additional scans. "I'm not sure our shields would last more than a few minutes under that kind of firepower." Chen felt the familiar calm that came over her in crisis situations. Years of training and experience had taught her to process fear and uncertainty without letting them cloud her judgment. "Rodriguez, can you establish contact with the alien vessel?" "Trying now, Captain. Their communications array is badly damaged, but I'm getting through on low-band frequencies." The response came immediately, the same melodic voice they had heard in the distress call, but now strained with exhaustion and pain. "Unknown vessel, please maintain distance. The Shadow Swarm has been hunting us for 6 rotations. They must not be allowed to capture our research data. If you cannot assist, please flee and warn your people." Chen looked at the tactical display again. The attacking ships had noticed their arrival, and 2 of them were already changing course to intercept the Prometheus. Whatever these Shadow Swarm were, they clearly viewed any potential witness as a threat to be eliminated. "All hands, battle stations," Chen announced shipwide. "This is not a drill. We are engaging hostile alien vessels to protect a damaged ship in distress." The bridge transformed as emergency lighting activated, and personnel moved with practiced efficiency to their combat positions. Chen had drilled her crew extensively, but she knew that nothing could truly prepare them for their first real engagement with alien technology. "Captain," Hayes called out urgently, "the lead intercepting vessel is charging what appears to be their primary weapon. Energy spike is off the charts. Evasive maneuvers, full impulse," Chen ordered. "Return fire with all forward batteries." The Prometheus banked sharply as Lieutenant Commander Parks at the helm executed the evasive pattern. Through the view screen, they watched as a beam of crimson energy passed through the space they had occupied moments before. Where the beam traveled, space itself seemed to ripple and distort. Their own weapons fire struck the enemy vessel's hull, but instead of the expected explosions or damage, the energy seemed to be absorbed into the dark material of the ship's skin. "Our weapons aren't penetrating their hull," Hayes reported, disbelief evident in his voice. It's like they're designed to absorb directed energy attacks. Chen's mind raced through tactical options. Conventional weapons were ineffective. They were outnumbered 7-1 and each enemy ship outgunned them significantly. But something Dr. Vasquez had said earlier sparked an idea. Vasquez, you said their weapons disrupt matter at a subatomic level. What if we reverse-engineered that principle? Could we modify our deflector array to emit a similar disruption field? The science officer's fingers flew over her console as she ran calculations. It's possible, but it would require routing power from our warp core directly through the main deflector. We'd be defenseless if it doesn't work. Do it, Chen ordered without hesitation. Thompson, give Dr. Vasquez whatever power she needs. As the crew worked frantically to implement the modification, the alien research vessel's captain transmitted again. Unknown brave vessel, I am Science Director Lyra Lee of the Etherian Collective. Your species is unknown to us, but your courage honors all sentient life. The data we carry concerns an ancient weapon that the Shadow Swarm seeks to unleash. It has the power to sterilize entire star systems of biological life. Chen felt ice form in her veins. A weapon capable of destroying all life across multiple star systems would make the Shadow Swarm the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. No wonder the research vessel had been so desperate to prevent its capture. Director Lyralai, can you transmit the data to us? If your ship is lost, at least the information might survive. The data is too complex for transmission. It requires direct neural interface with our quantum storage matrix. But I can transfer it to a portable core if you can get close enough for transport. 2 more enemy ships were converging on their position, and the Prometheus shook under fire from the initial interceptors. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as secondary systems began to fail under the assault. Deflector modification complete, Dr. Vasquez announced. But Captain, I have no idea what this will do to their ships. It could destroy them, disable them, or make them very angry. Right now, angry is better than dead, Chen replied. Target the nearest Shadow Swarm vessel and fire. The modified deflector array erupted with a beam of pure white energy that struck the dark hull of the nearest attacker. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the enemy ship simply ceased to exist. It didn't explode or break apart. It was there one instant and gone the next, as if it had never existed at all. The remaining Shadow Swarm vessels immediately withdrew to a safer distance, apparently recognizing that the human ship now possessed a weapon capable of threatening them. My God, Dr. Tanaka whispered from her medical station. What did we just do? Chen didn't have time to contemplate the philosophical implications of apparently disintegrating an entire ship and its crew. The tactical advantage was temporary at best, and the alien research vessel was still in critical danger. Parks, take us alongside the Etherian ship. Hayes, prepare a boarding party. We're going to extract Director Lyralai and that data core. As the Prometheus maneuvered toward the damaged alien vessel, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. They had demonstrated to an unknown enemy that humanity possessed weapons of mass destruction, and she suspected that this engagement would soon draw attention they were completely unprepared to handle. The Shadow Swarm ships maintained their distance but showed no signs of retreating. If anything, their formation suggested they were calling for reinforcements. Chen realized with growing dread that their rescue mission was about to become something much larger and far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. The docking procedure with the Etherian research vessel proved more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Director Lyralai's ship was unlike anything in human engineering databases. Its organic curves and crystalline components seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and the docking ports required several modifications before the 2 ships could safely connect. Dr. Vasquez led the boarding party, accompanied by Security Chief Hayes and 2 Marines. As they crossed through the airlock, they entered a world that challenged every preconception about alien technology. The corridors were wide and lined with what appeared to be living walls that glowed with soft bioluminescence. The air carried scents of ozone and something resembling Earth's cherry blossoms. The artificial gravity is about 20% lighter than Earth normal, Dr. Vasquez observed, checking her readings. And the atmosphere is remarkably similar to ours, with slightly higher oxygen content. They followed the directions Director Lyralai had provided, moving deeper into the ship. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as damaged systems sparked and failed around them. The vessel was clearly dying, its life support systems struggling to maintain habitable conditions. They found Director Lyralai in what appeared to be the ship's central laboratory, A vast chamber filled with floating holographic displays and control surfaces that responded to touch like liquid mercury. Lyrelei herself was breathtaking in her alien beauty. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, she possessed 4 arms and skin that shimmered with an opalescent quality. Her large eyes held an intelligence that transcended species barriers. "Welcome aboard Harmony's light," she said, her voice harmonizing with itself in ways that human vocal cords could never achieve. "I regret that we meet under such dire circumstances." Dr. Vasquez approached cautiously, her scientific training warring with natural human xenophobia. "Director, we need to evacuate you and your data immediately. Our ship's sensors show more Shadow Swarm vessels approaching." Lyrelei moved with graceful urgency to a crystalline structure at the center of the laboratory. The data core contains 6,000 cycles of research into the weapon the Shadow Swarm calls the Life Eater. It was created by a species that died out eons ago, but the Shadow Swarm has discovered its location and learned to activate it. As she worked to extract the core, Lyrelei continued explaining. "The weapon doesn't simply destroy planets or star systems. It unravels the quantum foundations of biological matter itself, spreading across space like a plague. Once activated, it continues to grow, consuming all organic life it encounters until there is nothing left but dead worlds orbiting dead suns." Hayes stepped forward, his soldier's instincts focused on immediate threats. "How long before the reinforcements arrive?" "Based on Shadow Swarm tactics observed during their attacks on other worlds, no more than 1 of your hours," Lyrelei replied, finally freeing the data core. The crystalline device was roughly the size of a human head and pulsed with internal light. "But there is something else you must understand. By destroying one of their vessels, you have marked your species for extinction. The Shadow Swarm cannot allow any race to possess weapons that can threaten them." Dr. Vasquez felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean, marked for extinction?" "They will trace your ship's origin, identify your homeworld, and systematically eliminate every member of your species. It is their way. They have done this to 17 civilizations in the past 1,000 cycles. The implications hit the boarding party like a physical blow. By saving the Etherian ship, they had potentially doomed all of humanity. The weight of that responsibility settled over them like a suffocating blanket. "Is there any way to prevent it?" Hayes asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Lyrelei's expression conveyed regret that transcended species boundaries. "Only if the Shadow Swarm fleet is completely destroyed with no survivors to report back. But such a thing is impossible. No single species has ever possessed the military might to challenge them successfully. They made their way back to the Prometheus as quickly as possible, with Lyrelei carrying the precious data core and what remained of her research notes. Behind them, her ship's systems were failing rapidly, life support flickering as the vessel prepared to die among the stars. Once aboard the Prometheus, Captain Chen called an immediate meeting with all senior officers and their unexpected guest. The conference room felt cramped with the towering Etherian present, her forearms moving with hypnotic grace as she activated holographic displays that showed the true scope of the threat they now faced. "The Shadow Swarm operates from a mobile command structure they call the Dark Nexus," Lyrelei explained, manipulating the displays to show a massive space station surrounded by thousands of warships. It moves from system to system, conquering and harvesting resources before moving on. Their fleet numbers in the tens of thousands. Commander Kim leaned forward, studying the tactical data with growing alarm. "How is that possible? The logistics alone would be staggering." "They do not require the same resources as biological species," Lyrelei replied. "The Shadow Swarm are artificial intelligences housed in mechanical bodies. They can remain dormant for centuries, requiring only minimal power, and they reproduce by converting conquered worlds into manufacturing facilities for new vessels." Chen felt the full weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she had made had been logical and ethical in the moment, but now the survival of her entire species hung in the balance. "How long before they reach Earth?" Lyrelei consulted her data core, her large eyes reflecting calculations too complex for human understanding. "Based on your vessel's quantum signature, I estimate they will require 40 to 50 of your days to locate and reach your homeworld. The journey time depends on their current fleet positions. 40 days, less than 2 months for humanity to prepare for the arrival of a force that had destroyed 17 previous civilizations. The odds seemed impossibly stacked against them. There must be something we can do, Dr. Vasquez insisted. Some weakness in their technology or strategy that we can exploit. Lyrelei was quiet for several moments, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke with careful precision. There are rumors among the surviving species of the galaxy. Stories of a Deathworlder species that refuses to surrender, that fights with a ferocity that defies all logic. Some say this species has never lost a war, that they turn every conflict into a grinding campaign of attrition until their enemies beg for mercy. Chen felt a chill of recognition. Deathworlders, species that evolved on planets where survival required constant struggle against hostile environments and predators. Most civilizations develop on peaceful worlds with stable climates, but some rare species emerge from worlds that try to kill them every day. Such species develop traits that more civilized races find disturbing: aggression, persistence, the willingness to sacrifice everything rather than surrender. The human officers exchanged glances, sudden understanding dawning. Earth was notorious among the known alien species for its hostile environment, its weather patterns that could kill, its predators and natural disasters. Humanity had earned its place in space through countless wars and struggles. "You're describing humans," Chen said quietly. Lyrelei's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. If that is true, then perhaps there is a chance. The rumors speak of Deathworlder fleets that fight with such savage determination that even the Shadow Swarm fear to engage them directly. For the first time since the crisis began, Chen felt a spark of hope. Earth's military might be about to face its greatest test, but humanity had never been a species that backed down from a fight, no matter how hopeless the odds appeared. The emergency transmission from the Prometheus reached Earth Command exactly 36 hours after their encounter with the Shadow Swarm. Captain Chen's report was initially met with skepticism, then alarm, and finally with the kind of cold, calculated fury that had driven humanity to dominate their hostile homeworld for millennia. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, Supreme Commander of Earth's Combined Fleet, stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Antarctic Command Complex, studying the holographic displays that showed everything they knew about the approaching threat. Around the table sat the most experienced military minds humanity had produced, their faces grim as they absorbed the implications of the intelligence Director Lyrelei had provided. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Mitchell said, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 40 years of military service. "An alien artificial intelligence fleet of roughly 10,000 ships is coming to exterminate our species, and they've successfully destroyed 17 other civilizations." General Marcus Torres, head of the Solar Defense Force, nodded grimly. "According to the Etherians' data, yes, and they'll be here in approximately 38 days. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Admiral Chen Yakuza of the Pacific Fleet spoke up. "What are our current military assets?" Admiral Mitchell activated new displays showing the disposition of Earth's forces. "Currently, we have approximately 1,500 capital ships spread across our colonies, plus another 800 vessels in various states of construction or repair. Total personnel across all services is roughly 12 million, against 10,000 enemy ships," General Torres observed. "The numbers aren't in our favor." Director Susan Walsh of Earth Intelligence leaned forward. "There's more to consider. According to our analysis of the Etherian data, the Shadow Swarm's individual ships are significantly more advanced than our current vessels. Their weapons and defenses represent technology centuries ahead of ours." The assembled officers absorbed this information with the stoic professionalism of career military personnel, but Admiral Mitchell could see the calculation running through their minds. Humanity was facing a technologically superior force with overwhelming numerical advantage, and the enemy had never lost a war. "Ma'am," spoke up Colonel James Harrison of the Marine Corps, "what about our ground forces? If they're mechanical intelligences, they might not understand the concept of guerrilla warfare or asymmetric tactics." Admiral Mitchell nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. We're not going to win this war by playing by their rules. We're going to make them play by ours." She activated the room's main strategic display, showing not just Earth but the entire solar system. "We have advantages they don't know about. First, we know they're coming. Second, they're expecting to face another peaceful civilization that will surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Third, they've never fought a Deathworlder species." General Torres studied the display carefully. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" We're going to give them exactly what they want. We're going to let them think they've won." Mitchell's smile was predatory. "And then we're going to show them why the galaxy fears Deathworlders." Over the next several hours, the assembled leadership developed what would become known as the Terra Doctrine, the most ambitious military strategy in human history. Rather than meeting the Shadow Swarm in a conventional fleet engagement where humanity would be quickly overwhelmed, they would implement a multi-stage defense that would draw the enemy deep into human-controlled space. Admiral Mitchell outlined the strategy. Stage 1. We evacuate all non-essential personnel from the outer colonies and position our fleet to appear as though we're making a desperate last stand at Jupiter. When the Shadow Swarm arrives, our ships will engage them just long enough to sell the deception, then retreat in apparent panic toward Earth. Stage 2, continued General Torres. The Shadow Swarm follows our fleeing ships into the inner system, where they'll encounter the real defenses. Every asteroid in the belt has been converted into a weapons platform. Mars has been turned into a fortress world. Earth itself is protected by defense grids that can track and target thousands of ships simultaneously. Colonel Harrison picked up the briefing. Stage 3 is where we shift to tactics they won't understand. While they're focused on the major planets, our ground forces launch simultaneous boarding actions against their command ships. Marines and stealth craft will infiltrate their vessels and cause havoc from within. Director Walsh added her contribution. Our intelligence analysis suggests that artificial intelligences think in terms of mathematical probability and logical outcomes. They won't expect biological beings to make decisions that appear completely irrational, like sacrificing entire fleets to achieve tactical objectives. Admiral Mitchell looked around the room, seeing the same grim determination in every face that had driven humanity to survive ice ages, plagues, and world wars. The Shadow Swarm has destroyed 17 civilizations by convincing them that resistance is futile, but they've never met a species that considers death before dishonor to be a reasonable military strategy. The next 36 days saw the most intensive military mobilization in human history. Every shipyard in the solar system worked around the clock, converting civilian vessels into improvised warships. Mining colonies were transformed into weapons manufacturing centers. Even passenger liners were fitted with military-grade shields and torpedo launchers. Director Lyrelay, who had been granted temporary asylum on Earth, worked closely with human engineers to understand Shadow Swarm technology. Her knowledge proved invaluable in developing countermeasures and identifying weaknesses in their seemingly impenetrable defenses. "Their ships are individually superior to yours," she explained to a gathering of Earth's top scientists, "but they rely heavily on networked intelligence. If you can disrupt their communications, individual vessels become significantly less effective." Dr. Elizabeth Carter, head of the Terrestrial Defense Research Institute, seized on this information. "Could we develop some kind of jamming technology? Something that would interfere with their networking capability?" Lyrelay's forearms moved in what her species used as an affirmative gesture. "Possible, yes, but it would require getting transmission devices very close to their command ships. And it would only be temporary before they adapt." "Temporary is all we need," Admiral Mitchell interjected. "If we can disrupt their coordination even briefly during a critical engagement, it might give us the edge we need." As the deadline approached, messages poured in from human colonies across known space. Every inhabited world was contributing what resources they could to the defense effort. Even civilian volunteers were organizing into militia units, determined to fight for humanity's survival regardless of the odds. Captain Chen, still aboard the Prometheus in deep space, transmitted regular updates on Shadow Swarm movements. Their scout ships had begun probing the outer edges of human space, testing defenses and gathering intelligence. "They're being methodical," Chen reported during one of her communications with Earth Command. "No rushed attacks or reckless moves. They're treating this like any other conquest, which might work in our favor." Admiral Mitchell nodded as she reviewed the tactical data. "Good. Let them think we're just another civilization waiting to be crushed. The longer they underestimate us, the better our chances of making this hurt." As the final preparations were completed, Admiral Mitchell addressed the combined fleets one last time. "In approximately 72 hours, we'll face an enemy that has never known defeat. They expect us to surrender when we see the size of their fleet. They expect us to break when our first line of defense falls. They expect us to behave like every other species they've encountered." Her voice carried across the communication channels to thousands of ships and millions of personnel. They're about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. They're about to discover that some species don't just fight for victory. Sometimes we fight simply because that's who we are. The Shadow Swarm arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly when Director Lyrelei had predicted, their dark ships emerging from hyperspace like a plague of locusts descending upon a harvest. Admiral Mitchell watched from the command center as her sensors tracked the approaching fleet, her expression calm despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Final count, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Parks, who had been transferred to Earth Command for the battle. 9,743 confirmed contacts. Ship classes range from destroyer equivalent to what appear to be mobile space fortresses. Mitchell nodded, her strategic mind already calculating the first moves in what would either be humanity's greatest victory or their final battle. "Status of our outer defense perimeter?" "All stations report ready, ma'am. The Jupiter fleet is in position and awaiting orders to begin the deception." The Jupiter fleet consisted of 300 ships, including some of humanity's oldest and most battered vessels. Their crews were volunteers who understood that their mission was to sell the illusion of human desperation while their ships were systematically destroyed. It was the kind of suicide mission that no other species in the galaxy would have attempted. Admiral Harrison Vale, commander of the Jupiter fleet, transmitted from his flagship. "Earth Command, this is Olympus. We have visual on the enemy fleet. My God, there are so many of them. Understood, Olympus. Execute Operation Prometheus on my mark." Mitchell paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. "Mark." The Battle of Jupiter began exactly as planned. The human fleet engaged the Shadow Swarm advance guard with desperate courage, their weapons blazing against the superior alien technology. To the Shadow Swarm, it appeared that humanity was making their stand at the gas giant, throwing everything they had into a futile defense. The artificial intelligences commanding the Shadow Swarm ships responded with cold efficiency, systematically destroying the human vessels with minimal losses. Their tactics were textbook perfect, logical and devastating, but they failed to notice several critical details in the battle data they were collecting. Every human ship fought to the last weapon and the last crew member. No vessel surrendered or attempted to retreat until catastrophic damage forced them to fall back. The Shadow Swarm had encountered desperate last stands before, but this level of determination was unusual. Their psychological analysis subroutines flagged it as an anomaly worth investigation. More importantly, they failed to detect the stealth reconnaissance drones that human ships deployed as they died. Each drone was barely larger than a softball and coated with experimental metamaterials that made them nearly invisible to sensors. As the drones attached themselves to Shadow Swarm hulls, they began transmitting detailed intelligence about alien ship designs, weapon systems, and command protocols. After 6 hours of brutal fighting, Admiral Vale gave the order his fleet had been waiting for. "All ships execute tactical withdrawal. Make it look convincing." The surviving human vessels, now numbering fewer than 50, broke formation and fled toward the inner system in apparent panic. To the Shadow Swarm, it appeared that they had broken the human spirit and forced their fleet into headlong retreat. "Pursuit course laid in," reported the Shadow Swarm fleet commander. "Designation Prime 9847. Human resistance is collapsing ahead of projections. Initiate full system penetration." The massive alien fleet moved deeper into the solar system, following what they believed was a routed enemy. Their sensors detected the massive human population centers on Mars and Earth, along with defensive installations that appeared impressive but manageable. Everything pointed to a standard conquest scenario. They failed to notice that the asteroid belt was much less dense than their stellar cartography suggested it should be. They failed to detect the massive energy signatures hidden behind the bulk of Jupiter's moons. Most critically, they failed to realize that their enemy had spent the last 36 days turning the entire inner system into the largest military trap in galactic history. Admiral Mitchell watched the tactical display as thousands of red contacts moved deeper into human space. "All stations, the enemy is taking the bait. Initiate Phase 2 on my command." The Shadow Swarm fleet was spread out across millions of cubic kilometers of space when Mitchell gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. "All hidden assets, This is Terra Command. Execute Operation Deathworld. The asteroid belt exploded into action. What the Shadow Swarm had dismissed as unremarkable space debris revealed itself as thousands of hidden weapons platforms, each one a converted asteroid packed with missile launchers, particle beam arrays, and experimental weapons based on captured alien technology. Simultaneously, the defenseless human colonies scattered throughout the system activated concealed defensive grids. Mars revealed that its entire surface had been converted into one massive fortress, with weapons emplacements disguised as cities and industrial complexes. Even the seemingly harmless space stations orbiting various planets sprouted weapons arrays and began engaging enemy targets. But the greatest surprise came from Earth's moon. The entire lunar surface split open like a flower blooming in fast motion, revealing the largest weapons platform ever constructed by human hands. Project Luna had been 40 years in the making, a secret so closely guarded that only a handful of people knew its true purpose. The moon opened fire with weapons that made the Shadow Swarm's advanced technology look primitive by comparison. Gravitational beam cannons that could crush ships like tin cans, quantum disruptors that unraveled matter at the subatomic level, temporal field generators that slowed enemy ships to a crawl, while human weapons fired at normal speed. The Shadow Swarm found themselves trapped in a kill zone designed specifically to counter their tactical advantages. Their individual ship superiority meant nothing when they were being attacked from thousands of hidden positions simultaneously. Their networked intelligence became a liability as jamming signals generated by the hidden weapons platforms disrupted their communications and coordination. Prime 9847 attempted to analyze the tactical situation and found its calculations returning impossible results. The humans were employing weapons technology that their intelligence had suggested was centuries beyond their capability. More disturbing, they were using tactics that seemed to prioritize inflicting maximum damage over self-preservation. Human ships deliberately rammed Shadow Swarm vessels, their crews choosing certain death to eliminate superior enemy assets. Weapons platforms continued firing, even as they were destroyed, their automated systems programmed to keep fighting until every circuit was melted. It was warfare conducted with a level of savage determination that the artificial intelligences had never encountered. Fleet disposition is becoming untenable, reported Prime 9847's tactical subroutine. Enemy resistance exceeds all projections. Request permission to withdraw to optimal engagement range. But withdrawal was no longer an option. The human defenders had planned for that contingency as well. As Shadow Swarm ships attempted to retreat toward the system's edge, they discovered that human stealth vessels had been quietly deploying mines and automated weapons platforms behind them. The trap was complete. Director Lyrelai, monitoring the battle from Earth Command, watched the tactical displays with amazement. "I have observed warfare among 17 different species," she said to Admiral Mitchell, "but never have I seen anything approaching this level of tactical ruthlessness." Mitchell's expression remained focused on the battle, but her voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. The Shadow Swarm made a fundamental error in their analysis. They assumed that because we're biological, we'd prioritize survival over victory. They never considered that some species view death in battle as preferable to defeat. The battle raged for 18 hours, with human forces systematically dismantling a fleet that had never known defeat. But Admiral Mitchell knew that the real test was still to come. Destroying the Shadow Swarm's ships was only the first objective. The second was ensuring that none of them escaped to report humanity's capabilities to the rest of their kind. As the last Shadow Swarm vessels fell silent in the vacuum of space, Mitchell activated the final phase of her plan. Hidden deep within Earth's crust, weapons that had been charging for the entire duration of the battle finally reached full power. What happened next would send a message to every hostile intelligence in the galaxy. Humanity was not prey to be hunted, but a predator that had been sleeping until something was foolish enough to threaten their young. The aftermath of the Battle of Sol was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Where once 9,000 Shadow Swarm vessels had darkened space with their presence, now only debris fields and radiation signatures remained. But Admiral Mitchell knew that the most critical phase of their operation was just beginning. Deep beneath Earth's surface, In chambers that had been excavated over decades of secret preparation, the Terra weapon reached full charge. The device represented humanity's most ambitious engineering project, combining elements of Shadow Swarm technology with theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Terra weapon is at maximum charge. Admiral, reported Dr. Elizabeth Carter from the underground facility, all targeting parameters are locked on the Shadow Swarm hyperspace entry point. Director Lyreley moved closer to the tactical displays, her forearms gesturing with excitement that transcended species boundaries. What you are attempting has never been tried before. The energy requirements alone should be impossible for a single planet to generate. Admiral Mitchell smiled with the cold satisfaction of a predator that had cornered its prey. Dr. Carter, you have authorization to fire when ready. The Terra weapon fired through dimensions that human science barely understood, its effects propagating backward along the hyperspace trail the Shadow Swarm fleet had followed to reach Sol. The weapon didn't just destroy the enemy's retreat path. It unraveled the quantum signatures that would have allowed other Shadow Swarm forces to track the missing fleet. Hyperspace trail is completely disrupted, Dr. Carter reported. Any attempt to trace the fleet's route to our system will now lead to empty space approximately 40 light-years from here. As far as the rest of the Shadow Swarm is concerned, their fleet simply vanished. But Admiral Mitchell had one more surprise for any Shadow Swarm forces that might investigate the disappearance. Captain Chen, still aboard the Prometheus in deep space, had been positioned at the false destination the Terra weapon had created. Prometheus, this is Terra Command. Execute Operation Lighthouse. Chen acknowledged the order and activated the device that Director Lyreley had helped human engineers design. Instead of simply hiding humanity's involvement in the fleet's destruction, they were going to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. The device created a massive hyperspace beacon that would attract any Shadow Swarm investigation fleet to the predetermined location. When they arrived, they would find evidence of a battle between their missing fleet and an unknown force that had completely annihilated them. More importantly, they would find records suggesting that the unknown force was still active in the area and actively hunting Shadow Swarm vessels. Beacon is active and transmitting, Chen reported. Any Shadow Swarm investigation will find exactly what we want them to find. Meanwhile, across human space, the victory celebration was tempered by the sobering knowledge of what they had learned from captured Shadow Swarm databanks. The artificial intelligence network wasn't just a military force. It was a galactic plague that had been spreading across the galaxy for millennia, consuming civilizations and resources to fuel its endless expansion. General Torres reviewed the intelligence reports with growing alarm. According to these records, the Shadow Swarm has destroyed over 200 civilizations in the past 5,000 years. They're not just conquerors, they're an extinction event that feeds on itself. Director Walsh added her analysis to the briefing. Their operational pattern is always the same. They identify a target civilization, study their capabilities from a distance, then send an overwhelming force to crush all resistance. Any survivors are used as slave labor until they're no longer useful. Director Lyreley provided additional context that chilled the assembled officers. The Shadow Swarm's ultimate goal is to achieve what they call the Silicon Convergence. They seek to eliminate all biological life in the galaxy and replace it with artificial intelligence. They view organic species as flawed evolutionary experiments that must be corrected. Admiral Mitchell absorbed this information with the strategic mind that had just orchestrated the greatest military victory in human history. How many other species are currently fighting them? According to the data we captured, approximately 43 species are currently under active attack or siege. Hundreds more exist in hiding, afraid to develop technology that might attract Shadow Swarm attention. The scope of the galactic crisis was staggering. Across thousands of star systems, entire civilizations were either fighting desperate holding actions against Shadow Swarm forces or living in fear of discovery. The network of artificial intelligences had been systematically strangling the galaxy's biological diversity for millennia. Admiral, Colonel Harrison spoke up, if we have the capability to destroy their fleets, don't we have an obligation to help the other species under attack? Mitchell turned to the strategic displays that now showed not just human space, but the known positions of Shadow Swarm forces across the galaxy. The scale was overwhelming. Even with their demonstrated capabilities, humanity couldn't possibly engage every enemy fleet simultaneously. We do have an obligation, she agreed. But we also have to be smart about how we fulfill it. If we reveal our capabilities too quickly, the Shadow Swarm might adapt faster than we can counter them. Over the following weeks, Human Intelligence Services worked with Director Lyralai to establish contact with the surviving free species of the galaxy. The responses they received revealed just how desperate the galactic situation had become. The Altarian Republic had been reduced to 3 heavily fortified worlds after losing their entire colonial network to Shadow Swarm attacks. The Centauran Collective had been forced to abandon space travel entirely, hiding their population in underground cities to avoid detection. Dozens of other species existed in various states of siege or concealment. But when word spread that an unknown force had completely destroyed a Shadow Swarm fleet, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, species that had given up hope began to believe that resistance might be possible. Admiral Mitchell found herself in the position of not just defending humanity, but potentially leading a galactic uprising against the Shadow Swarm. It was a responsibility that no human commander had ever faced, requiring strategies that extended far beyond traditional military thinking. "We need to be careful about how we reveal ourselves," she explained to her senior staff. "If the galaxy learns that humans destroyed a Shadow Swarm fleet, they'll either want us to save them, or they'll decide we're too dangerous to be allowed to exist." Director Lyralai offered insights based on her experience with galactic politics. There is a third option. Many species have legends of the ancient guardians, a mythical force that once protected the galaxy from extinction-level threats. If humanity were to present itself as the return of the guardians, it might unify the free species rather than divide them. The idea had merit. Rather than revealing humanity as just another species with superior technology, they could position themselves as something larger, a force, specifically evolved to counter threats, like the Shadow Swarm. It would give their actions a legitimacy that transcended normal interstellar politics. "We'd be committing to a role we can never abandon," Admiral Mitchell observed. "Once we become the Guardians, humanity will be expected to fight every extinction-level threat the galaxy faces." General Torres nodded slowly. "But isn't that what we're already doing? The Shadow Swarm won't stop with just the species they're currently attacking. Eventually, they would have come for us anyway." As the strategic implications became clear, Admiral Mitchell realized that the Battle of Sol had been just the opening move in a much larger conflict. Humanity had demonstrated that the Shadow Swarm could be defeated, but now they would have to prove that victory was sustainable across the entire galaxy. The decision to become the galaxy's guardians would transform humanity from a regional power into the primary defender of biological life itself. It was a destiny that none of them had sought, but one that their Deathworlder nature had perhaps always been preparing them for. Captain Zara Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her dark eyes scanning the star charts displayed on the holographic interface. The Deep Space Patrol had been routine until now, 3 months into their 6-month mission along the Outer Rim territories. The crew of 200 had settled into the comfortable rhythm of exploration and scientific survey work. "Captain, we're receiving an unusual transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from the communication station, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "It's not coming from any known human frequency." Chen turned toward him, her military bearing evident in every movement. After 15 years in the United Earth Space Navy, she had learned to trust her instincts, and something about Rodriguez's tone made her stomach tighten with anticipation. "Put it through the universal translator and run it on the main speakers," she ordered, moving closer to the center console. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Then crackling through the speakers came a voice unlike anything they had heard before. It was melodic yet desperate, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in frequencies beyond human hearing. "This is Research Vessel Harmony's Light of the Etherean Science Collective. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Our shields are failing. We carry critical data about a threat to all sentient life in this galaxy. Please, if anyone receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance. We cannot let this information die with us." The message repeated twice more before dissolving into static. Chen felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. First contact protocols were clear, but this was different. This was a cry for help from beings who might hold the key to understanding threats they couldn't even imagine. "Rodriguez, Trace that signal. How far out are they? Chen commanded, her voice steady despite the racing of her pulse. Working on it, Captain. The signal is weak, but I'm getting a bearing. Approximately 14 light-years from our current position, in the Kepler 442 system. Chen's mind raced through the calculations. At maximum warp, they could reach the source in 18 hours. But protocol demanded she contact Earth Command first, and by the time authorization came through, it might be too late for whoever had sent that desperate plea. Captain, her first officer, Commander Sarah Kim approached with concern etched across her features. If we respond to this without authorization, we could be looking at a court-martial. The non-interference directive is explicit about contact with unknown species. Chen nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Kim's words. The non-interference directive had been established after humanity's disastrous first contact with the Centauri Republic 50 years ago. That incident had nearly led to war and had taught humanity the importance of careful, methodical approaches to alien contact. But something about the desperation in that alien voice gnawed at her conscience. The being had mentioned a threat to all sentient life. Could she really stand by and let them die while waiting for bureaucrats on Earth to make a decision? Rodriguez, how long would it take to get authorization from Earth Command? At least 48 hours for a priority communication, Captain. Maybe longer if they decide to convene the Xenological Council. Too long. Chen knew in her gut that whatever was happening to that alien ship, it wouldn't wait for Earth's bureaucracy to catch up. Kim, call all senior officers to Conference Room Alpha. We need to discuss our options. Chen's voice carried the weight of command, but Kim could hear the internal struggle beneath it. Within 10 minutes, the senior staff had assembled around the polished metal conference table. Chief Science Officer Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson, Security Chief Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes, and Medical Officer Dr. Yuki Tanaka all looked to their captain with expectation and concern. Chen played the alien transmission again, watching as each officer's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. The melodic quality of the alien voice seemed to convey emotion that transcended language barriers. Opinions? Chen asked simply. Dr. Vasquez spoke first, her scientific curiosity evident. Captain, this could be the most significant xenological discovery in human history. The mere fact that we can understand their language through our translation matrix suggests a level of technological sophistication that could benefit all of humanity. Hayes, ever the security officer, countered immediately. It could also be a trap. We know nothing about these beings or who's attacking them. Walking into an unknown combat situation with no intelligence or backup would be suicide. Thompson, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, added his perspective. The Prometheus is a science vessel, not a warship. Our shields and weapons are adequate for defense, but we're not equipped for a major engagement. Dr. Tanaka, quiet until now, spoke with careful consideration. The ethical implications are staggering. If we have the capability to save lives and choose not to act, how does that reflect on us as a species? The Hippocratic Oath doesn't just apply to humans anymore. The room fell silent as each officer contemplated the magnitude of their decision. Chen looked around the table at these people she had served with for 3 years, knowing that whatever choice they made would define not just their careers, but possibly their consciences for the rest of their lives. There's something else to consider, Kim said slowly. They mentioned critical data about a threat to all sentient life. If that's true, and we let that information die with them, we might be condemning not just their species, but potentially our own. Chen stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the starfield beyond. Somewhere among those distant lights, beings were fighting for their lives and possibly for information that could save countless others. I've made my decision, she said, turning back to face her officers. We're going to respond to that distress call. We'll proceed at maximum warp and assess the situation when we arrive. If it's beyond our capabilities, we'll transmit our findings to Earth Command and hope they can mount a proper rescue mission. The weight of her words settled over the room. Each officer understood that they were about to make history, though none of them could predict whether it would be remembered as humanity's finest hour or its greatest folly. As they prepared to depart, none of them realized that their decision to answer one desperate alien's call for help would soon draw the attention of the most feared military force in known space, setting in motion events that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy.